75% from 1998-99, the Liberals' last full year in office. An April 2004 staff listing includes no less than 8 clearly political, partisan staff. My question for the minister: will the minister tell the House how he can justify a 75% increase at Treasury and Policy Board paying for political staff while other programs face cutbacks?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question. As the honourable member would appreciate, government requires good advice, and that requires that you have the public servants with an array of abilities and talents that give government good advice. And I'm very proud of the people that we have at Treasury and Policy Board, both civil servants and other public servants, for the quality of the advice they give this government. Thank you.
Now, member for Halifax Fairview and the first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table a list of all staff at Treasury and Policy Board as of April 14, 2004. Just to give some examples, the minister's second executive assistant, one's not enough for this minister, he's got 2, is paid by Treasury and Policy Board. Mr. Dale Medill, a former staffer from the Premier's office, who went to work for Energy, is now at Service Nova Scotia, all the while being paid by Treasury and Policy Board, Mr. Speaker. Meanwhile, the Premier claims that his own office is leaner than it ever was under the Liberals. My question to the Premier: when will the Premier admit that the only reason that his office appears to be leaner than it was under the Liberals is that he's taken all the political staff and moved them over to Treasury and Policy Board?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The reason that my office appears leaner, Mr. Speaker, is because it's leaner. The answer is very simple. Now, if the member opposite is going to suggest that all of the people who work for government are directly working for me, yes, I will have a very large office budget. But, Mr. Speaker, the people that work directly for me are small in number, they work very effectively, and their efforts will stand up under the scrutiny of opposition parties and the scrutiny of the public. They do a good job.
Now, member for Halifax Fairview and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, at Treasury and Policy Board, there are also staff who work with and for Communications Nova Scotia, but they're paid for by Treasury and Policy Board. Now, Communications Nova Scotia already has a staff budget of $5.3 million in 0203, and we have pointed out a number of times and again today how the only real growth industry in the civil service is communications advisors to this government. My final question for the Minister of Treasury and Policy Board: why has this minister allowed this central agency responsible for public policy analysis to become a warehouse for political and communication staff?
Now, Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member knows that it is very, very important that government have good policy advice. Mr. Speaker, does the honourable member believe that in Nova Scotia, any government, any responsible government, would want to carry on without high-quality policy advice so that the government of the day can have the very best kinds of information on which to make its decisions?
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the NDP on finally catching on to the Premier's rules for the last 5 years. But, Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister responsible for the Public Service Commission. Mr. Speaker, thousands of government employees from one end of this province to the other are concerned that this minister and her government does not take her responsibility to them seriously. Using Bill 68 as an example, which caused such turmoil for healthcare workers, we have seen just how little respect this government has for its employees. Mr. Speaker, civil servants play an important role in the growth of our province and expect the government to respect their collective agreements. So my question to the minister is, does the minister respect the right of government employees to be consulted with regard to policy changes that affect their job security?
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess Bill 68 has come up, but I think that it's important to note that Bill 68 died a natural death at the end of March, so it is not on the books at this point in time. Now, what also is important is that this government and this minister definitely values this public service, and we are committed to moving forward to see to it that employees get the results that they want. Thank you.
Gentleman member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Committed, the employees get the results they want. Interesting. Mr. Speaker, earlier this spring, I, on behalf of our caucus, sent out a press release expressing concern over the future of the Shelburne Youth Correction Centre. The Tory MLA for Shelburne responded by sending a release accusing the Liberal caucus of fear-mongering and stating that the future of the facility was in good hands under his watchful eye. Mr. Speaker, on February 10th of this year, following a cabinet meeting, the government announced the closure of the Shelburne facility. The local Tory MLA told his local press that he had no prior warning and only found out at the same time that the press found out. So my question to the minister is, would the minister please explain to this House, and particularly to the former employees of the Shelburne Youth Centre who are about to lose their jobs, and the entire community, as to why she, as the minister responsible, did not consult with them prior to the announced closure on February 10th.
Gentleman Minister of Human Resources.
I guess, Mr. Speaker, I would not be the minister responsible for the Shelburne Youth Facility, but Justice would be, so I would refer that to Justice.
Justice.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the honourable member's question. Mr. Speaker, what the honourable member knows, and what all Nova Scotians know, and indeed what the workers in that facility knows, that the government simply recognized what had in fact happened, which was that there were only 2 young people in that facility, and that it would be irresponsible to continue to operate that facility, both from the point of view of the young people that were there and from the point of view of the taxpayers. That's why we made the decision. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right decision to make.
Gentleman member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the responsibility for these workers and the responsibility for the collective agreement is of the minister responsible for the Public Service Commission, and shame on her for hiding behind the Minister of Justice rather than responding to the concerns of these workers. It is her responsibility when a contract has been broken. It is her responsibility when workers receive no notice of an impending closure of their facility. It is her responsibility when the consultation takes place 8 weeks after the announced closure, when the ministers go parading down to Shelburne looking concerned about the future of that facility, knowing that it's already been closed. My question to the minister, which hopefully she'll answer this time, is will the minister provide a guarantee to government employees and communities across this province that in future she will actually stand up for their rights at the cabinet table and consult with them prior to implementing policy changes that affect their livelihoods and the security of their families?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Public Service Commission.
Mr. Speaker, what I will say is that the Public Service Commission has been working diligently to see to it that these employees have found placement. And of the 29 employees, 14 have gone to other government departments, 6 have retired, and we are still working ongoing with the remainder. Now, also what I'd like to say is that, yes, we did go to Shelburne, and we are committed to work with those municipal politicians to see to it that we can do the best that we can for them. As far as the date and the amount of time, yes, it was announced on February 10th, but all Nova Scotians knew it was only a matter of time that that happened.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Mr. Speaker, the process used in Nova Scotia for home care assessment is cruel, and it degrades and humiliates people requiring home care. It is nothing more than a psychiatric evaluation, Mr. Speaker. Home care applicants report to us that they are given very little information and they feel completely humiliated by the process. My question to the Minister of Health is, why does your department's home care assessment continue to be intimidating and embarrassing, and an embarrassing process for Nova Scotians?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, when the department makes decisions relative to the level of care that is appropriate for people in this province, it has 2 responsibilities. It has a responsibility to the individual who will be the recipient of the care, but it also is a responsibility to the taxpayer that's paying for that care that indeed an appropriate level of care is being provided. The balance that needs to be achieved with respect to those two objectives is one that requires a comprehensive analysis of the individual's needs. The system that we use in this province is one that is recognized internationally. It employs an international standard, and it is deemed to be appropriate for the circumstances.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, care coordinators are trained in determining the needs of individuals, yet their role is reduced to filling in the dots on a piece of paper. This process treats home care applicants as though they are not capable of discussing their care needs. In fact, these tests allow little input from potential clients as to what supports would be most meaningful to them. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Health. Your party campaigned on self-managed attendance care, which remains a pilot project. When will you live up to this promise to Nova Scotians?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We work continuously to improve the level of service that we are able to provide in this province. It is a continuous effort by all in the department, and it is an objective of the government, and we will continue to do that, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Thank you. In fact, Mr. Speaker, there are only 9 self-managers in that pilot project right now. Mr. Speaker, Home Care Nova Scotia is stretched to its limits in meeting acute and chronic home care needs. Many clients who are entitled to one level of service get far less because the system cannot meet their needs. My final question to the Minister is, when will you admit that self-managed attendant care not only gives clients more independence, but it is cost-effective and would relieve pressure on the home care system?
Hear, hear. Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are continuously evaluating policies and priorities. There are many priorities that present themselves to government, and we're not able to address all of them as rapidly as we would like. The honourable member is correct in her analysis that to move in that direction is where we would like to be going, and we will continue to prepare ourselves to move in that direction as the resources permit.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my question will be to the Minister of Health as well. Mr. Speaker, I would like to follow up on my colleague's question on home care and self-managed attendant care. The province recently introduced a $50 penalty fee for home care clients who counsel with less than 24 hours notice. Most clients we spoke to said it is routine for home care to counsel or rearrange appointments for them without the same courtesy. Mr. Speaker, this fee is unfair and is punitive to the unpaid family caregivers and to the care recipients alike. There are other ways to address abuse of the system, and in the very rare cases that it occurs. My question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister is, will you scrap the $50 fine?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member should appreciate that it is a fee of up to $50. It's not a fee that is set at $50 in all instances. The honourable member should also appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that when appointments are cancelled and don't take place, then others who need home care suffer as a result of that, because the resources that were committed to the individuals who cancelled the appointment, those resources are not available to others. Mr. Speaker, anybody whose appointment is cancelled as a result of appropriate conditions beyond their control would not be charged such a fee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North on your first supplementary.
And that honourable minister knows full well that regardless of the price of fee, it's a cost that comes out of the meager incomes of those individuals who live on social assistance. Also, Mr. Speaker, a disabled Nova Scotian explained to me how his needs for home care traps him in his home and dictates how his life should be lived. I will share that concern with the minister today. He does not have a set time for care to be provided, so he must set aside hours of his day to wait for home care. Now, the $50 penalty means that if he has the opportunity to go to a special event or to take a drive, which is in rare occasions, or to have access to transportation that is so hard to get, he gets fined. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, why is this system operated in such a way that the client becomes bound to their home because they need the care?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The program that we are that is under consideration through the honourable member's questions is a home care program. The care that is provided within the home. The individual who is providing that care must travel to the home. If upon arrival at that home, the individual who is to receive the care is not there, then that resource, the person who is being paid by the taxpayers, is not able to provide that service to others. That, Mr. Speaker, is a problem that needs to be addressed, and we are hopeful that this will assist us in ensuring that such appointments are not cancelled and that the home care that's being provided will in fact be provided at the appointed times.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I would remind that honourable minister that there's not a Nova Scotian taxpayer alive who would recognize this penalty on disabled persons, this particular fine. And the minister is very much aware of that. And all the taxpayers that I spoke to think that this is hideous on behalf of this government to impose a fine. So, Mr. Speaker, if this person were to be able to use self-managed attendant care, or to have access to self-managed attendant care, he could hire the appropriate caregiver to be there when he needs them. It would then give him the much-needed freedom. That's not available. So my question to the minister, will this government stop treating disabled persons like they are sick and give them a program that respects their individuality and fosters their independence instead of trapping them in their homes?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the intent of the home care program is to do just that, to allow people to be able to continue living in their homes, receive the appropriate level of care that is required. And it is also the responsibility of the department to ensure that the resources that are employed to provide that care are in fact fully employed all of the time. Any person who, through no fault of their own, is unable to meet a commitment, Mr. Speaker, would not be charged that particular fee. And Mr. Speaker, the objective is to ensure that as many Nova Scotians receive as good a home care as they possibly can when it is appropriate for them to receive it.
The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to Minister responsible for the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation. Mr. Speaker, as Minister is well aware, the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation has received a fair amount of criticism over the past year. In fact, it is currently subject to a fraud investigation by the Halifax Police Department. The Chair of the Board, Mr. Peter McCreath, appeared before the Public Accounts Committee last fall and was considerably less than forthright in his answers. My question to the Minister is, considering the importance of this operation of the provincial revenues, does he believe at such a critical time it was wise to place a political appointee as the chair of the board?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. McCreath has the support of the government and he's doing a very effective job.
The Honourable Member for Preston on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it appears that the political patronage was very much at play when the chair was appointed, because at the same time, 5 other PC party supporters were appointed to the board. And to top that off, late in 2003, the former treasurer of the PC Party of Canada was hired as Director of Communications for the corporation. Can the minister please explain the justification behind stacking the senior management of the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation with prominent members of his party?
Honourable Minister of Transportation, Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, we only employ the very best, and Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that the fact that they're conservatives probably says something.
Now, Member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to table a copy of a tender that's recently issued by the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation. As the House will note, it's for communication services. I would suspect that the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission's products are not difficult to sell, and at a time when financial resources of the province would be better spent on roads, schools, health care, and other important issues for the residents of Nova Scotia, I would ask the minister to explain, why does the Director of Communications need additional help to sell products that would sell themselves, especially since the person is a political appointment?
Now, Mr. Transportation, Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation operates at arm's length from the government. They are a business, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure that they have hired the people to do the advertising and the PR for the Commission, with a concern for putting forward the best balance sheet at the end of the year, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Sackville, Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Tourism and Culture. The newspaper today ran a story indicating that the Atlantic Theatre Festival in Wolfville may have to close its doors by the end of the week because of ACOA reneged on a funding commitment. The Atlantic Theatre Festival is a crucial part of the economy of the town of Wolfville and the Annapolis Valley as a whole, Mr. Speaker. It receives acclaims, recognition from across the country, and is a vital part of Nova Scotia's arts community. My question to the minister, what are you doing to ensure that the Atlantic Theatre Festival will not have to close its doors so that the show will go on for the 2004 season?
Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member is correct. The Atlantic Theatre Festival, Mr. Speaker, has done a tremendous job over the last number of years in doing what they do best. And Mr. Speaker, I have spoken with the local member, my colleague from King South, on this very issue, and I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that the money that we invested in the festival last year, being $147,000, is an investment we feel very strongly about. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member that I am actually writing the federal minister. I will have a letter going out by morning.
I'll member for Sackville, Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. ACOA's about-face certainly came as a shock to the Atlantic Theatre Festival. They had planned not to mount production this year and instead focus on fundraising, but ACOA told them that they would help out. So they went ahead and hired staff, Mr. Speaker. The government has shown willingness to provide support for many organizations, even those who don't really need it, Mr. Speaker, like the Sobeys. What more is your government prepared to do, Minister, to ensure that the Atlantic Theatre Festival 2004 season proceeds, instead of allowing the festival to close for good this year?
Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I believe it's safe to say that we have gone beyond, Mr. Speaker, the call of duty with respect to the Atlantic Theatre Festival. Last year, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the $147,000 we invested in the theatre festival, Mr. Speaker, we also provided a loan through the the Office of Economic Development, which my colleague was very much involved. Of that, Mr. Speaker, I believe $49,000 of that was forgiven, Mr. Speaker. We have staff working with those in the festival. The fact, Mr. Speaker, that ACOA, and I do not know all the details yet, with respect to the deal which was made with the Atlantic Theatre Festival, but I am writing the minister to find out the exact details of that deal.
Member for Sackville, Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's important that our minister stays involved with the conditions that are going on down in Wolfville. We have many residents in the area that benefit from the Atlantic Theatre Festival, and the whole area benefits at times. They have 36 artists, Mr. Speaker, that have given up work elsewhere to go to Wolfville and prepare for this year's season. And to say that 36 people may lose employment this summer is important, and I think the minister must act quickly on this because of the indications on the web page today says the season has been canceled.
Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. Opposition member's business. I'll call upon the honourable member for Keep Written Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you please call Resolution 1098? Resolution
1098. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want you to know this is a topic, of course, of importance to many members of this House. I want in particular to tell you how important a topic it was when yesterday my 20-year-old daughter was delivered out to the airport as she headed off for her summer job planting trees in northern Ontario, in fact, in Moosonee, Mr. Speaker. My daughter, and you've heard me speak of her before, is a student at NASCAD. And let me tell you, the students at NASCAD, post-secondary students across this province, students who are planning to or are currently attending community colleges across this province are not happy. They are not pleased. In fact, when I told my daughter that we were planning on debating this resolution on Opposition Day, well, I don't know if I can particularly tell you what she said, but she told me to give it to the government members as best as I could without the parliamentary language included. I want you to know I am not prepared to hear the education minister stand in his place today and tell us what great universities we have in this province. I'm not prepared to hear him stand in his place today and tell us what great community colleges we have. We know that. Those members and the member from Halifax Citadel here who sits to my left, when he stands and takes that X-ring out, I know he's as proud because of their ranking across this province and across this country. So we don't want to hear how great the post-secondary institutions are in this province. We know that. We accept that. We recognize the standards that are established across this province, whether it's the community colleges, whether it's at St. FX and its #1 ranking, which I know that member from Halifax Citadel is aware they'll only have for another year before they leave it to that institution in New Brunswick called Mount Allison, but that's another topic. I want you to know that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what my daughter said. Don't forget to remind members opposite that there's a food bank at NASCAD. Now, what is a food bank doing in a university? Have we reached the stage with these young people? And to the credit of people, parents, volunteers in the community, we continue to make sure that food is available for these young people who attend the College of Art and Design just down the street here. But that is a true contradiction in terms. That's a contradiction in terms that is inexplicable to young people. Because as my daughter said, it's always sad leaving university this time of year because you don't know whether many of my friends will be back. Many of my friends can afford to be back at that world-recognized art college down the street. I want to table for members opposite, and I incidentally want to thank the library staff for photo-enhancing these documents for me. University grads sink deeper into debt. April 27th, the article was in the Herald, and the article was also in the Daily News. It's written by Sue Bailey from the Canadian Press. I'm going to quote from it for just a moment, if I may, Mr. Speaker. A Stats Can study released last September confirmed that richer kids are far more likely to fill university and college classes. It found that 83% of high school grads whose families earn at least $80,000 a year went on to higher education in 2001. What we're facing here is a crisis, Mr. Speaker, a crisis where we have students very capable of moving on to post-secondary institutions, but through no fault of their own, and because of their parents' financial circumstances, they cannot move on to community colleges or universities in this province or in other provinces across this great country. Bachelor grads, referring back to Sue Bailey's article, leave university owing on average $19,500. I want you to know we can use comparative figures all we want, but that is a heck of a hard way to start that first year out if you're lucky enough to get a job in your career. And Ian Boyko, the national chairman of the Canadian Federation of Students, in this same article comments, and I'd like to quote this, and we've already tabled this document. Mr. Boyko says, we're talking about indebting an entire generation, or at least the poor half of it. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, Mr. Speaker, based upon my previous career, and based upon the fact of what my father's income was, and where I grew up in Dorchester, New Brunswick, my father, under no circumstances, could afford to send his son to university. And I received that hand up. It was not a handout, but I received that hand up because at the time, and the particular university that I was fortunate enough to go to, I was allowed to attend through an arrangement that I found out many years later. So let me tell you, this is a personal topic, a very personal topic. And when I was fortunate enough to become a school teacher, I constantly said to young men and women, and one of them is incidentally sitting to my right here, the member from Sackville-Cobequid. When this young member was a student at Sackville High School, I recall as one of his coaches saying, get yourself some post-secondary education. And believe it or not, he took my advice, as there were at the time other young people that have attended high schools where I've been fortunate enough to teach. But now, what are we telling young people? Are we telling them, continue to pursue your dreams? Continue to make sure that you're going to have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to go on for further education? And oh yes, you better make sure your parents have very deep pockets, because tuitions continue to go through the roof. Student loans become more and more difficult. And we can point fingers at the federal government. We can point fingers at various levels of government. We can say to universities, why do they pass on the cost of high maintenance and the various other things at the university to the students? I've had the opportunity to meet with, and I know members of my caucus have taken the opportunity to meet with university professors and university presidents, and we have heard their tales of woe, and it all comes down to a lack of funding. But there has to be some hope, and the hope has to be revolved around the fact that young people will be continued to receive the opportunity of an education. Because an education is that magic moment in a young person's life when the door of opportunity swings open, swings wide open. And if you're in that first year class and you are in that seat, you have a wonderful opportunity in whatever the course is, in whatever the institution is, to begin to look at a career, a job at the end of the tunnel that will provide for you and your family and your province and your country. You will have the opportunity to make a valid contribution. Now, I understand, I truly do, that there are limited dollars and that they are not always available for everything. But I want you to know that students who are currently enrolled in post-secondary institutions in this province, and I'm sure across this country, have had it. And they've had it right up to here, if I may use that description. They have had it. And we are going to see many more demonstrations. We're going to see these young people who are going to demonstrate that they, just as the guy in New York said when he threw up the window and screamed out into the street, we're not going to take it anymore. And I can share, as I've shared with members in previous experience, the picture in the Daily News where there were students panhandling, and I will table one of these because I'm not allowed to use props, as I know. There were students panhandling, university students panhandling in the street to protest the 4% tuition increase. And I want you to know the pride that I felt that day when I opened the Daily News, when I realized that one of the young women in that picture panhandling as a demonstration was that very same daughter that I've spoken out who has just left for Moose River and Moosonee to plant trees. That shows to me the involvement, the commitment, and how relieved I am to say that this young woman is taking to the streets to demonstrate that she isn't going to take it anymore. And I want you to know, there are student government leaders. There are people who have been elected as young men and women who hopefully will have the opportunity to return to their post-secondary institutions next year, and we will continue to hear from them. That Minister of Education and that government are going to continue to hear from them. The Minister of Finance in Ottawa is going to continue to hear from them, because they are the ones who will be speaking on behalf of young men and women in their various institutions. But you know, in the short time that I have to wrap up, I want to draw your attention again to this university grad sink deeper into debt. And I want to quote from the Federal Human Resources Minister, Joe Volpe, who downplayed the issue, saying a degree or a diploma pays off for most of it. And he said in this article, I think the criticism is unfounded. Well, Mr. Volpe, I'm telling you it's time to wake up and smell the coffee, because these kids aren't happy and they aren't going to take it anymore. It's going to become a federal election issue, and these young people are going to vote in bigger numbers than they ever have as they express their disdain for that federal government and their lack of funding for education in this province. I thank you for your time, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the Speaker for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance is still having some math problems, because on 3 occasions now he has stated that, in fact, universities this year will be receiving $8 million increase in funding. However, I am pleased to note that the Minister of Education, very concerned about math in this province, has his figures quite correct, and that is universities post-secondary will be receiving $2 million in increased funding this year, less than 1% of the total budget that is 1% increase for this year. Simply stated, this is inadequate level of funding. And in fact, according to statements from the university presidents, they have categorically determined that, in fact, $22 million is required to obtain or to move along on an even pace this year. So we are the government is providing $2 million versus $22 million. The universities themselves have indeed been doing their part, doing their job to assist students. This year in Nova Scotia, our 11 post-secondary institutions will be giving out $50 million directly through scholarships, grants, student assistance, jobs on campus, ways in which they, in fact, can mitigate against the very low increase that this government will be giving. In fact, it is the alumni of our universities and supporters who were able to make this $50 million available so that students can continue their education. The tuition reality is so real and impacting. We've heard it stated here, in fact, in the legislature on many occasions, that Nova Scotia has the highest tuitions in Canada. Currently, $1,500 above the Canadian average, $5,557 versus $4,025. Stats Canada, August 12, 2003. And when other fees are added in, the very base dollar that students put out on the average here is $6,000 versus the Canadian average of $4,648. We know that, in fact, it is having an enormous impact on students. last year, as a vice principal of a high school, I was beginning to wonder why so many students were going to Memorial University. A significant number had been going to Moncton, UNB, because we do have, of course, bilingual students in our school, especially from CFB Greenwood. So Moncton, UNB have been big gainers of our students. Last year, we had 12 students from our graduating class go to Memorial. We, of course, know that they have a tuition fee, $2,608. Most New Brunswick universities are about $4,500. So students, in fact, are leaving the province, good students who could be taking places on our campuses. In the budget speech, Mr. Christie stated, based on our population, we are at the top of the list when it comes to funding Nova Scotia post-secondary students. Now, the best information that I can access is from 2002. Operating grants per full-time equivalent, Nova Scotia rated 9th. On a per capita basis, we rated 5th. So I would like to see the minister table information to this House that would, in fact, clearly indicate, in fact, that that statement is substantiated. Because what I was able to gather was based on 2002, and I'd be surprised to see, in fact, that the operating grants had moved that significantly in a short period of time. We all know that our Nova Scotia Community College system is absolutely critical to the future of Nova Scotia, training a workforce that we currently need and will continue to need. It is, again, disappointing to see that they will have 3 years of increases going on here in the province. 3 years when their tuition fees will go up. At the same time, we are simply talking about multi-year funding. So students are getting 3 years of increases, but we are still in negotiating stages of multi-year funding. And again, from meeting with the presidents of the universities, they simply want this to move forward at a much quicker pace than what is currently taking place here in the province. Earlier I said that Nova Scotia students are leaving the province to attend post-secondary. And I would have to say that probably the most difficult situation that I've faced over the last number of years were students entering my office and debating the question of going on to university. Simply taking on the burden of many thousands of dollars was not in the culture of their family. And certainly my position was to take a strong stand of encouragement, knowing the value of a university education. But for many students who come from families who do not want to borrow those kinds of dollars, in fact, they are making a decision not to go on to university or post-secondary to any extent. I see this as an opportunity for government to move in here and provide greater assistance, greater tuition support, greater debt reduction support, and in fact, as we know, we have as well the great opportunity to connect to these students as they graduate. If we provide strong debt reduction to our students, incentives that will keep them here in the province, it can only be a win-win situation. It can only be a winning dimension for these young people to engage in growing Nova Scotia, and it certainly will be a win situation for our economy. So tying in that debt reduction, I think, into a stronger measure over the coming number of years, I think, is a challenge for the present government and governments to follow. simply to have students faced with that dilemma of not proceeding on to their education is one that I find regrettable, and certainly one that I feel as a government representative that I want to work for a better opportunity for our students. Time? Okay. I know that my colleague who has met with students on many occasions, I will give him an opportunity to also have a few words. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise and speak on this occasion about this very important subject. My friend from King's West referenced my having met with students in the past number of years, and I can recall about a year and a half ago when I had the opportunity to meet with the university presidents, the president of the community college, the president of the students' unions of the various universities, and the president of the Nova Scotia Community College students groups, along with community leaders and business leaders. And what I was struck by was that this was the first time that this group of people actually gathered under one roof to talk about the future of post-secondary education in Nova Scotia. The world has changed a great deal in the last 5 years, but it's going to change even more over the next 5 years. If we are to live up to our potential, if we are to be the modern dynamic province that we have the potential to be, then surely we are going to grow our way out of this through the knowledge economy. The knowledge economy is clearly the area where we have the greatest potential to lead as a province. It has happened in many jurisdictions across North America and indeed across the world. Where economic growth happens, it happens as a result of a creative, vibrant, dynamic, knowledge-based industry growing up and moving forward. It's interesting to note that despite our successes recently, and I reference the Thursday, April 24th, 2003 edition of the Chronicle Herald, an expert came, Ann Dowsett Johnson, an expert in education, and indicated to Nova Scotians in a speech that she gave to the Greater Halifax Partnership that Nova Scotia's education funding is almost preposterously low. We have been successful in some respects in Nova Scotia, but I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that post-secondary education in Nova Scotia is indeed on life support. And if we are to move forward, we need to recognize that education, particularly at the post-secondary level, is an investment. It's not an expense. Specifically with respect to that, I refer to a paper prepared by Robert Allen, and it's entitled, Paid in Full, University Grads Pay Full Cost of Education in Taxes. And the important lesson that Mr. Allen points out in all of this is that if somebody is finally given the opportunity to actually get a degree or a community college diploma, they will pay back the cost of that education, the government cost of that education in taxes over time. And it brings us back to the whole notion of an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure, a lesson that we need to learn when it comes to issues like health promotion, when it comes to the health of our citizens, when it comes to the debt of our province. It all ties together. Post-secondary education needs to be a priority. It needs to become a priority. And I would urge this government, in the strongest terms, to put it on the agenda and to make sure that students have the leg up that they deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now recognize the Minister of Health. Minister of Education, I'm sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise. I will start again and to speak on this important resolution. I guess in beginning, I see my colleague from Timberley Prospect has a daughter who is going out to plant trees in Ontario. Well, I want to tell them that my son planted trees in British Columbia for 3 years, and it's a marvelous experience. I also want to tell them that, going out of province or taking jobs for summer to try and help yourself in education is a good thing. For example, my colleague, the Premier, he was in the military or in the service during his universities. For me, I was a hard rock miner, which is kind of hard to believe, but I did that for a while. And and in the Yukon and in the Northwest Territory. So what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is that the cost of college or universities is relative. It's always been expensive and probably will continue to be expensive. Having said that, I want to say that I sympathize, and this government is trying to support in the best way it can young people who are going off to higher education. And the value of higher education in this province, the honourable member from Halifax Citadel talked about the commitment to education. No government in history has made a stronger commitment to education than I think our government. And Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that indeed we do, at least at the university level, have the highest tuition fees in the country, something that none of us are happy about, I want to tell you that our participation in Nova Scotia, the higher education participation, exceeds the national average by 62%. You're talking at the age of 18 to 24. Fully, Mr. Speaker, about 80%, not 80%, but we're above the national average by 62%, which is a very good thing. And it means that the people of this province hold education in great regard. We always have. We have the greatest university system in the country, and our community college system is making great strides. Now, I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that we do have a problem in Nova Scotia that we have to try and rectify, as we are so university-oriented that our figures are flopped. About 80% of the people who come out of high schools or wherever they come from, they opt to go to the university route. And about 20% go into either the community college or the private trade school. And Mr. Speaker, in other jurisdictions, that ratio is about 65 to 35. And we have to...
Member for Cape Breton West. Okay.
A short question. Mr. Speaker, I listened intently on the monitor the minister's comments, and I'm just wondering, in view of the growing unfunded liability within the teachers' pension fund within the community college system that was put before one of the committees recently, what is the plan, and how will that impact on what his long-term strategy is here?
Consideration, so I will pass on that question. Mr. Speaker, the current government has been making and will continue to make every effort it can afford to support students as they pursue post-secondary education. We invest more and more each year in our public schools so that young Nova Scotians are well prepared to enter university or college programs. We will continue to restore funding to universities, which had been cut by previous governments. For example, university operating funding was at an all-time high in 1983 at $212 million. It was cut all the way down to $175 million by 1997. And with the continuous investments of our government, we've been able to bring university funding back close to its peak, the peak level of 1993. And I should say, Mr. Speaker, there is at least $10 million more in research money out there now than there was in 1993, and that's not included in that figure. Nova Scotia, despite what the honourable member from Kings said, has the second highest university funding per capita in the country. But our dollars are spread thin, Mr. Speaker. We have universities, and we are subsidizing thousands of out-of-province students. The net gain of out-of-province students to Nova Scotia is about 5,000. In other words, we bring in about 10, we have about 5,000 Nova Scotians who are going elsewhere, but so we have about the net gain, we're paying for about 5,000 of other university. Now, Mr. Speaker, just for contrast, if we had a different funding system for universities, I want to tell you that I was down in one of my alma maters a little while ago. It happened to be down in the States, and this is a state university, not a private university. And they see out-of-province university students as a great revenue generator. For an undergraduate student at the University of Virginia, the increase next year will be the the undergraduate in-province student will pay $6,600. That's for a liberal arts and science degree. For an out-of-province student, out-of-province undergraduate student, it's going up to $22,000. $22,000. Now, I'm saying that a slightly different funding system. They use the out-of-province students as a revenue source. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, if we could get the federal government to allow the funding to follow the students, we would have about an additional $30 million to put into our university system. What it means now, Mr. Speaker, is we are sending $30 million of our money to other provinces. Mr. Speaker, other provinces, they say they don't have that problem, and that is a reflection, a real credit to our universities. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not suggesting we don't take out-of-province students, because they are a marvelous resource. They bring things to our province, and a lot of them stay here. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, I will tell you that 3 of my children went to an out-of-province university. So I am not really in a position to criticize too much. We have about twice as many students coming in as leaving, and say it's a testament to the quality of our universities, but it does create a financial problem. And, of course, Mr. Speaker, we understand that universities are facing rising costs, but we do expect them to seek every alternative to meet them without simply increasing students' tuitions. We do recognize that there's one way that we can help universities to do this, and knowing what funding will be available in the future will help them do a better job of planning to keep tuition increases to a minimum. And we are currently discussing a multi-year funding agreement with universities, and we aim to give universities a 3-year guarantee of operating funding. And in return, Mr. Speaker, we're discussing things like reducing duplication, making it easier to transfer credits between colleges and universities, identifying and supporting programs in areas that address our skills need, and of course, keeping tuition increases to our minimum. Now, we don't regulate tuition at our universities, Mr. Speaker, and I think there are a number of examples we can look across Canada where it's been done and it doesn't work. For example, they tried it in British Columbia, and the tuition increased, I think, something like 100% the year they took the cap off. In Ontario, they capped tuitions this year, and what did they do? They had to take money from public schools to pay for it, because they had to give a lump sum grant to the universities, $14 million, I think, so I saw, to the universities to make up for the money that they took from them, and that $14 million meant that they had to put a hold. They had to put a hold on funding for public schools. Anyway, that's the risk of a fully funded tuition fee. No matter how much funding we provide, the universities will never say that's enough. They would always want more, and that's understandable. The fully funded tuition freeze here would cost us about $14 million, which means that a lot of other needs would not be met. Now, our approach is to keep investing in universities as we can afford, and we'll continue to work with universities on keeping tuition increases to a minimum and try and provide stable funding. Now, I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, in the throne speech or the federal budget that came down, they didn't do anything really to help this issue of rising costs of university. They did, on the other hand, put money into access. But the issue is not access, Mr. Speaker, as much as it is to reduce the costs for the students who are going. And we do need, that's a partnership, Mr. Speaker. People can say anything you want to, but it's a partnership among the provincial government, the higher education institutions, and the federal government. We all have a role to play. And it's great to say we will help you get in, but they have to keep them there. Anyway, our government has committed $123 million to an expansion of the community college facility, and that's right across the province. And that's the largest investment in post-secondary education in our history. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia Community College's tuition is the 4th lowest in the country. And Mr. Speaker, I don't think our community colleges, to be quite frank, are overpriced. We have quality institutions, and the fact that it costs $2,250 or maybe $2,400 next year, I think is a bargain, to be quite honest. We have a quality system, and you know, if the information I get from the people who go to community colleges and those who are associated with them, the students are getting a good deal. Now, that doesn't mean that I would not like to see them paying $1,000 less or $1,500 less. I'm just saying, comparatively speaking, for what they get and what they can leave with, it's not a bad deal. And anyway, Mr. Speaker, as you know, the Community College Board of Governors has recommended some small increases to the government over the next 3 years. Cabinet will be considering those, and we will be informing the college of our decision very soon. The college, community college, stakes its reputation.
Order. Time allotment has expired. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's an honor that I rise here today to speak about the cost of tuition and education in the province of Nova Scotia, with the post-secondary education and the, Mr. Speaker, I have 2 beautiful facilities in my riding, the Nova Scotia Community College Marconi campus and the University College at Cape Breton, which has been very involved in our community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the $8 million that this government had announced for university funding, out of that $8 million, Mr. Speaker, the province is only ejecting $2 million in new money, Mr. Speaker, restoring the money that they took from the 2003-2004 fiscal year, Mr. Speaker. The University College at Cape Breton, out of this money, would receive $559,000, Mr. Speaker. It's not enough to change the plan that they have right now, Mr. Speaker, to increase the tuition at the University College at Cape Breton next year by 4.7%. This upcoming fall, Mr. Speaker. Students are facing unrealistic hikes in residence fee, Mr. Speaker. Most students today are carrying such a debt load and having to work 2 or 3 jobs or just another job aside from the university studies, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, and these jobs that they're doing are on minimum wage, and the debts that they are incurring, Mr. Speaker. I'll give you an example. The average debt for a graduating student in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, right now stands at $21,794, Mr. Speaker. By the year 2005, Mr. Speaker, it'll be $42,000, Mr. Speaker, by the time somebody graduates from an arts program in the university in this province, Mr. Speaker. Massive loans, you know, Mr. Speaker. That's why they're talking about the outward migration of Cape Bretoners, Mr. Speaker. When you finish at your university college at Cape Breton, Mr. Speaker, and you owe $42,000 by the year 2005, you have no other choice but to leave. Leave Cape Breton, leave Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, today what we export in Cape Breton is our youth and our brains, Mr. Speaker. Not coal and steel anymore. You know, not coal and steel, Mr. Speaker. The sweat is now turned to tears in Cape Breton Island, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, we'll also talk about a 2-tier system. We're creating a class-based society, Mr. Speaker, in which only the rich and children of families in upper areas and upper wealthy families, Mr. Speaker, will only children be able to attend universities in the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. You know, this government has canceled the province loans remission program, leaving this the only province without a debt reduction program for students, Mr. Speaker. That's a shame, Mr. Speaker. Today the kids work so hard to get their education and be there, Mr. Speaker. I would like to see funding increase to the point where UCCB is able to function properly and where they would be able to freeze their tuition, Mr. Speaker, you know, and have these opportunities for the children to stay at home and their youth to stay there. The present funding formula, which in my opinion provides an inadequate and inequitable level of funding for our university in Cape Breton Island, Mr. Speaker. demands and workloads for the students, and not just in their academic. It's very stressful, Mr. Speaker. The contribution to the university in Cape Breton is the social and economical well-being of Ireland. The students, they work so hard in the Bachelor of Arts and Community Studies program to make our community a better place to live, Mr. Speaker, and they're under a lot of stress. I take my hats off to any student today that takes the full course load and goes and gets involved in their community, Mr. Speaker, to make it a better place to live. I think it's very fortunate that we have such a university there. But the debt, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also table a poster that was done up by the student union at University College of Cape Breton. Do the skyrocketing cost of university have you down, Mr. Speaker? That's the headlines that I'm going to table here today. And you can understand, Mr. Speaker, that a lot of the students are down. Do you know that the students of Nova Scotia, the tuition fees have risen 126% over the past 10 years at the University College of Cape Breton? That's unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. 126%, that's hard to believe that in today's society that could happen to young people, Mr. Speaker. But yet university grads make 9 to 15% more with a university degree in the workforce, Mr. Speaker. And which would only make any sense when they graduate, Mr. Speaker, to be more taxes paid by these upper students, Mr. Speaker, that would be getting good salaries from their university education, Mr. Speaker. So it's a win-win situation when you get an... But our kids are moving away in groves, Mr. Speaker? Groves. They're just moving away, you know, and... Yes, just like oranges, I guess one member had said.
Well, now, you know, they're moving away.
This province also cut the 10 million loans remission programs, Mr. Speaker, and that was very beneficial to the university students today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my office alone, and people coming in, and my first lot of caseloads that I first received in my office, Mr. Speaker, with a lot of student loans, and the problem the kids were having with student loans.
And not being able to pay them
and
back.
not being able to pay them back and being put in collection agency, Mr. Speaker. Collection agencies hounding these students. And also problems and de-designation. And Mr. Speaker, some of these students have gone back to school to finish their education, are still in school, but somehow they got up and ended up being put in a collection agency. Here they are back in university in a collection agency with people calling them looking for money and taking payments on their bank accounts, Mr. Speaker, without any permission while they're back in school. I don't know how many times that's happened to me this year, Mr. Speaker, in my writing. Well, Mr. Speaker, I think I've said enough about the beautiful University College of Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. And I would like to share my time with the member from Halifax Atlantic at this present time, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Very good, very good.
Honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for sharing your time here. It was mentioned earlier by my colleague from Timberley that, as the Timberley Prospect says, as Ian Poyko says, we're indebting an entire generation, or at least the poorer half of it. And I would argue that at this point we are indebting not a single generation, but many subsequent generations. We know that education is obviously a determinant of income. We know also that it is a powerful determinant of health status. And we should be viewing it, I would argue, as an issue of health promotion. I don't know how many of you remember an advertisement that used to be featured on the subway walls in the United States by the National Association, the NAACP in any case, and NAACP, thank you. It was a picture of a young man, or a young woman as a case, and the caption beneath it was simply, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." And I think that here in Nova Scotia we need to keep that in mind. Nova Scotians are not a raw resource. They are not simply here to be used up and exported, to be mined. If we have a net inflow of students to Nova Scotia universities, and yet we have a stable population, something is going wrong. I think it's very important that we view the post-secondary system as one of what they call an economic engine. It is essential to the health, economic, mental, and physical, of Nova Scotians of this generation and of future generations, that we support them in fulfilling each person's maximum potential. I certainly am grateful that the Minister sympathizes with the burden of these many young people, but unfortunately we need a great deal more than sympathy. it would appear that the amounts budgeted for the post-secondary system are not always being fully absorbed. Why is this? Why is tuition going up? Municipalities are to some degree subsidizing universities in that their property assessments are based on a grant-in-lieu system. I hope that that is about to change, but it has to be recognized that there's funding coming not only from this province, but from all other levels of government. All right. Not only does the existence of our very fine post-secondary institutions contribute to the health directly of the students who attend them and the economic health of the communities that are there as well, but they also contribute to the health, physical health as well, of the community around them. We are very, very fortunate to have within this province 5 communities which are based around post-secondary institutions. And I think it's important that we do not forget the Collège de l'Acadie. We are fortunate as well in that we are able to provide education to that portion of our population who are francophone. And it is essential that we do not lose their contribution, their continuing contribution to our culture. If accessibility to higher education is denied for low-income students, I think we all know what the impact of that is ultimately. And I would like to suggest that no matter what we do ensure that there is adequate support, whether it be in the form of grants, loan remissions, or otherwise. It is essential that we do this because as a society we will pay the price, and the children of those students who have been unable to attend the universities and to fulfill their entire potential will also pay the price. We need to view this as a global societal responsibility. And as I say, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are not a raw resource. They are not to be wasted. They are not to be exported. One of the things that has really struck me over the last few years is that as lifespans increase, many people go through several careers during a lifetime. And I think we should also be looking at this from a labor point of view as well, because it's unrealistic for any person in this day and age to expect that their entire working career will be spent in the manual trades. We need to look as well at the importance of people having other pursuits. We know that backs give out, legs give out, and people who have not been trained necessarily to use anything else but those are left devastated, high and dry, and a burden to selves more than anybody else. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to remember not only the young students, not only the Anglophone students, but all of our Nova Scotians. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the Deputy Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like for you to call Bill 52, an act to set criteria for prioritizing road improvement projects.
Bill 52. Recognize the honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to speak to this bill, and I guess that certainly members of the opposition, I think, would see some value in this, and it's our hope, actually, at some point that the government may see something positive in this. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that when you're a rural member, roads are definitely an issue. And I think back to when I first came to this House in 1998, and my conversations with the then Minister, the Honourable Clifford Huskelson, that I would come at him on a number of occasions around what I saw as priorities for addressing concerns around roads, and what he or his department saw as priorities. And I remember him telling me that it was three criteria: road or condition of the road, volume, road condition, and ride. That was the three: volume, road condition, and ride. So, and of course, that meant the largest volume would be on the the 102 or the 100 series highways, and so the point I would try to convince him of would be the notion that, well, how do you expect people or goods to get to the 100 series highways when they're coming from the secondary road system? And being in a rural riding, certainly heavy truck traffic has paid a heavy price, I think, on our roads, and certainly when it comes to logging trucks and pulp trucks. Not to mention the trucks for hauling milk, for example, Mr. Speaker. And certainly, as much as we think about the loads that they carry, we have to think about the necessity of those trucks being able to get over those roads. And in particular, I think about the dairy farmers in my area. Hants East can claim to produce 30% of the milk that's produced in this province. So that means that 30% of the milk is hauled from farms to dairies in this province from my constituency. And those trucks are big trucks. I mean, they're enormous. And I think milk weighs about the same as water, which is about 10 pounds to the gallon. And I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, that's a lot of gallons. And the former minister, the Honourable Clifford Huskisson, did make the point to me as I tried to make the case for the damage to roads by tractor trailers, logging trucks in whatever form, that he said that an 18-wheeler generally is regarded as having the same impact on a road as 1,200 cars. So when we try to make the case of volume, and the minister will try to make the case that the volume is higher on the 100 series roads, then I have to at least try to rebut him by saying, well, if tractor trailers are equivalent to 1,200 cars, then you can do the quick math to determine how many of those trucks there are on certainly rural roads in Nova Scotia. I would say that up until last year, up until 2003, I thought I wasn't particularly abused by the Tory government. I think since 1999, actually since 1998, we have been able to get a road paved in Hants East. One, I think, was purely because the process had gone so far along to getting it done. It was probably the reason that it was completed by the Liberal government in 1998, because another road in my constituency that was booked to be done in 1998 came off the list. Big surprise after a New Democrat was elected, I guess. Well, obviously the people must think so by the response from the election last year. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that from '99 on until last year, we did get a road paved, but that seemed to end in 2003. I was able to get the Honourable Clifford Huskisson and the Honourable Gordon Balzer both out over roads in Hants East. To get any successive ministers after that has been particularly difficult. I want to say I did get the Honourable Ron Russell in my office for an hour one day a couple of years ago. But
that's the point of order for the
Speaker. Yeah. I wonder.
Deputy Premier.
I wonder if the honourable member from Hants East is aware that the current Minister of Transportation drives over his roads at least 1 or 2 times a week. Hear, hear.
I'm aware that the Honourable Minister does travel over Hants East roads. I guess that's why I find it so perplexing, is why it's so difficult to make the case for the work that needs to be done on Enhance East Roads. And I want to tell the House that the minister did come with me for a trip over the East Uniacke Road in Mount Uniacke. And I want to say that I appreciate that. I know the people there appreciate that. And I was a bit disappointed because the time frame we had booked was somewhat curtailed, and that's the reason we only got over that one road. But at least the minister is aware. I know that wouldn't be on his regular route of beginning between home and Province House, so I was glad that we were able to get over that. And that was an example of, I think, that he could take as an example of other roads, which I mentioned through West Gore and so on in my constituency. When I speak to my constituents, Mr. Speaker, I try to make the case, because I know that when it comes to talking to my area manager or to the minister, that even I have got to be able to tell them what I would think would be the priorities. If they say, well, look, you're asking for all of this, what's your A, B, C, and D of the top ones? If you had to have something done, what would it be? And I have to be able to go back to my constituents and explain to them why I said Road A and not their road. And I got to be able to look them in the eye and have a reason that's I think, well-founded for doing that. And my reason has always been the worst roads first. And as much as I say that, there are those roads that I'd like to see the government set up its priority list to look at the worst roads first, but also whatever other uses are going on. The 215, which I mentioned to the minister the day we were out, and he said, look, I've been over the 215, but this is a heavily trafficked tourist area in my constituency, part of the Glooscap Trail, and it would seem to me to be in the government's best interest, in the people's best interest, in tourism's best interest, if we were actually able to take the tourist routes and have funding go to them outside of the other envelope of funding to ensure that we can encourage tourists to come back. So, Mr. Speaker, roads will continue to be a serious issue. I know the minister, I think I can expect the minister to respond by saying what I see in correspondence that he sent to people on the East Uniacke Road, that about the dollars necessary to bring all the roads up to a certain standard. And I want to say that I was a little disappointed to see one of those correspondence that would indicate that the East Uniacke Road is not going to make the capital program and more RIM money. And I think it's beyond the stage of spending more rural impact mitigation money on it. I think he's spending good money after bad, and I would encourage the minister to rethink this. And interesting enough, I see that a road in Hants West has made the list for paving. And I don't knock the people living on those roads. I think if I would certainly believe that that road would need paving. And I've been to some of the other members on the government side, and I've seen roads that were paved last year, even though I thought I didn't. I wonder why we didn't get any Enhance East. But the roads that I saw that were paved needed to be paved, and I don't take anything away from those members for trying to bring their concerns to the minister and to the House, because their constituents have every right to expect their members to speak for them. And the roads I saw, they definitely needed work done. But with that said, I don't go or come to the House or come to the minister expecting to get treated better than any other member, but I certainly like to be treated as well as any other member. And Mr.
No answers for good taste, John.
Mr. Speaker, I hear what the members are.
Mr. Speaker.
I hear what the members say. There was a rumor, but I don't know if they heard a rumor that I fell and struck my head too. But that's, so I think while I have some clarity of thought, I will remain with this party.
Hear, hear.
And fight the good fight for my constituents. And I want the government to think about how it prioritizes roads, because I have roads that are in terrible shape in my constituency,
Order.
and partly because of
Order. The order. Recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and say a few words on this particular resolution. There's so much that can be said in context of this particular resolution that, well, the resolution for the bill. They're still confused. Yes, the bill, but it's a resolution for the bill. Mr. Speaker, what we do need is some clarity from the government on a number of issues. Number one, the government in its 1999 Blue Book commitment said that it would provide a 10-year roads plan for the people of Nova Scotia. Has anyone seen that 10-year roads plan? I haven't. Despite the fact that the minister says that despite the fact that the Minister of Transportation and Public Works said it exists, so we have to take him at his word. We'll never find it, despite the fact that we've asked him at least 3 times in the last year for a copy of that. He has not produced it. But I know he's a man of great honor, and he will, on some future day, provide that 10-year roads plan that he says he has. Like his almost-to-be colleague in the last provincial election in Cape Breton West, who indicated in written form that he, with some friends and an engineer, had developed a 4-year roads plan for all the roads in Cape Breton West. And he did that by letter, open letter, to all the constituents, all the voters of Cape Breton West. And attached to that, Mr. Speaker, was a nice little letter of support from the then Minister of Transportation and Public Works, one Honourable Michael Baker. Now that letter was written on July 4th. That was the day, I believe, before the election was called. Now that may have been just a coincidence, but that was put in there. But that's fine. You have to give credit where credit is due. So let's find out if it's a good 4-year roads plan. We haven't been able to find out if the 10-year roads plan is good, but let's see if we could find out on this one. So I wrote, well, first of all, I asked the Minister of Transportation and Public Works in question period here in the last session. He didn't answer the question. I didn't get anywhere with it, so I sent a Freedom of Information request over to the department. Well, before Michael, the Minister of Justice, got his hands on it, we were lucky it was free of charge. But this request was put in last year, actually just shortly after the election, and it was point specific. I was looking for a copy of the 4-year business plan submitted by Cape Breton Regional Municipality Councillor Ivan Doncaster to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works on or about July 4th, 2003, as indicated in a letter from Councillor Ivan Doncaster to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. Do you know what I received back, Mr. Speaker? What's that? Confirmation that no such plan existed in the department. No. No such plan. No. Now, what can I tell you? So I said, well, let's do the honourable thing. Maybe there's a breakdown in communication. I wrote to the good councillor. I wrote to the good councillor on August 7th, 2003, and I'll table it. December 10th, 2003. January 19th, 2004. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I haven't even got an acknowledgement for my correspondence. So I said, well, maybe he's a busy man. And there could be a bit of a breakdown in communication. So, in a meeting in my office, I asked the good councillor for a copy of the plan. He says he may have a copy floating around home, but it would be best to ask the Minister of Transportation. Well, also in the Freedom of Information request, they even indicated they had contacted the local municipality for a copy of the 4-year roads plan, and they don't have one. So I guess what I'm suggesting is the former Minister of Transportation used his department very effectively to play patronage politics. Because that's not the only constituency he carried out such antics. In the good riding for Halifax, Clayton Park, the same type of antics were carried on. In Cape Breton Centre. That was the purpose, the sole purpose, I believe, for that minister just sitting there in that department. So he could try and do like his predecessor on a previous day, the Honourable Guy Leblanc, when he was Minister of Transportation, he did the same thing. It was the same old John Buchanan-style antics of politics. At that time, Mr. Speaker, 85% of every dollar from the Department of Transportation capital construction budget went into Tory-held ridings. And there's little to suggest anything different.
Order. Point of order. Honourable Member for Colchester North on the point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Honourable Member would entertain a question just for clarification. Was there a tender in your area for road paving approximately 2 weeks ago? And also, in today's paper, and would you clarify where this is, because I'm not quite sure where it is. Trunk 4 from approximately 6.7 kilometers west of React Brook Ridge, westerly to top of hill in Middle Cape, approximately 3 kilometers. Is that your area by any chance?
Order. Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Well, the minister, well, it's a lot better than what they've been doing for the last 5 years. They've been using the Environment Department to buy used Volkswagens, flip them upside down, and fill in the potholes. That's just about what you've been doing down there. I tell you, you have to have back brakes to drive the number 4 highway, and then when you get home, you have to put a collar around your neck because you're shaking so bad. So you wonder why they would call tenders on that number 4 highway. How many tourists have disappeared off the face of the earth falling in some of those potholes? That's the question I would ask.
Order. You have an intervention with a member for... Order. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Before the Honourable Member gets too excited, I'm wondering if he might entertain another question.
Would the member entertain a question?
No, Mr. Speaker. All we get is fluff from that honourable member. That's all we ever get is platitudes and fluff, and we haven't got time for that. I wanted to make the point that, yes, the minister did visit my constituency. He did review some issues of concern that I raised on behalf of my constituents. I acknowledge that, and I thank the minister publicly, as I did when he sent a copy of the tender documents to my office. And I did that because when somebody does something good, something right, you acknowledge that. And I think that's the proper thing to do. But look at the reality of it. The roads in Cape Breton West are in deplorable state. And that 3 kilometers that's being called for tender, the tenders were out how many times before? Twice? And they were canceled. No, the present Minister of Transportation was the minister at the time, and he knows. He's driven the roads. He knows how bad they are. Every little bit is a help. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll give you another example. Well, even since this government came to power, the number of claims for the Department of Transportation for damages to vehicles by Nova Scotians has doubled, and yet the number of payouts has gone from about 35% down to 6%. They are ignoring the pleas from the public. Mr. Speaker, I'll even table one such case in Sydney River, and I'll provide the photographs. Potholes if you would provide that to the minister first so he can see how bad it is. Right in front of Lady Fatima Church, where you'll get close to 30,000 vehicles a day going there. And Mr. Speaker, that pothole went unchecked for nearly a month. And the department writes back to my constituent and says, because they act with the best of due diligence and because they felt that it had been fixed in a reasonable period of time, that they shouldn't pay this gentleman. Well, if you look at those photographs, there's maybe about 15 or 20 potholes all jagged together, but they only filled one. They only filled one. Now, what was he going to do? Hopscotch over the others and drive on that and then keep going? That's not the way it works. Not enough money is being provided locally to address these local concerns. And the RIM program has been a measured success in Cape Breton West. I will have to admit that. But the problem is, I don't take any pleasure when I see contractors from New Brunswick coming down to Cape Breton West displacing local workers and local contractors. I don't think that should be done. The whole idea of the RIM program was to supplement and to assist the local contractors, the smaller ones, who couldn't compete against the larger contractors in the province who are gobbling up the lion's share of all the contracts. 2, maybe 3 companies received about 85–90% of all the major contracts. I would like to think it's not true, but it is, and the minister knows. Look at the annual report. Look at the annual report from the Nova Scotia Road Builders Association. Ergo, the evidence is there. So, Mr. Speaker, I realize my time is coming to a close, and there's much more to be said on this issue. And I would invite the minister to call more tenders for roads in Cape Breton West. The Troutbrook Road, the Marion Bridge Highway, the Louisburg Highway, the Manitou Highway, the Northside East Bay Highway, and yes, more on route number 4. So many more issues to be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I am delighted that we have bill number, whatever it is, 52 with us this afternoon, which talks about prioritizing the transportation department's capital expenditures, and I think the honourable member that brought that forth, the member for Pictou West, was very sincere in bringing that bill forward. But I would also say, Mr. Speaker, that he's very misguided because that bill is not applicable at the present time. Mr. Speaker, I was going to stand on my feet today and say nice things about the Department of Transportation and what we're doing and how we're spending our money and how we're prioritizing our money. But, Mr. Speaker, I just listened to the last member that got to his feet, and I have had to change direction. Mr. Speaker, in the 1980s and early 1990s, and when I say the early 1990s, I mean up until 1993, our highway system in Nova Scotia was a good system. It was a very good system, as a matter of fact, and I always said, Mr. Speaker, if you drove across the border from Amherst into New Brunswick, you could drive across with your eyes shut, and you'd know where you're in New Brunswick because of the way the roads were in New Brunswick.
Order, please. The Honourable Minister allow for an introduction. The Honourable Member for Kings North on introduction.
Thank you very much. I'd like the House to give a very, very warm welcome to a special lady. I sometimes wonder how intelligent she is with some of her decisions she makes, but nonetheless, she is a person I have a great deal of respect for. The future Mrs. Richard Hrobert, Nancy, and I don't know if she's changing her name or keeping her maiden name, but Nancy, if you'd rise and be greeted.
Thank you for that. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
We had roads in Nova Scotia which were as good as any other province in Canada. In 1993, unfortunately, the government changed. And I mean, when I say unfortunately, it certainly was unfortunate for the Department of Transportation. Because, Mr. Speaker, up until that time, we were spending somewhere in the neighborhood of about $110 to $120 million in capital expenditures on the highway system of Nova Scotia, and that was in 1990 dollars. Mr. Speaker, when we came back into government, back in 1999, the capital budget for the Department of Transportation was something like $38 million. And it had been going down steadily from 1993 to 1998-99. Mr. Speaker, when some shingles fly off the roof of your house, you get up there and you repair them. When your house has to be painted, you repaint it. Because you know, unless you do ongoing maintenance, it's going to cost you a lot of money in the end. These persons from across the way, when they were in power, Mr. Speaker, they cut not only capital, they also cut maintenance. And that's why the highway system when we came into power, Mr. Speaker, was in such a rank state of disrepair. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is making much about the fact that perhaps things are not happening in his particular riding the way they did when that government was in power. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about such things as making those kinds of political decisions, it always makes me angry because, Mr. Speaker, I don't think we should run our highway system that way. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, in 1993, I had a bridge that had been out to tender, and the tender had been let. I had a road to be repaved, and the tender had been let. When that crowd came in, Mr. Speaker, they canceled both tenders. Mr. Speaker, when they came into power, we had done that section of the 101 from Sackville out to Mount Uniacke. We had laid the roadbed, but we hadn't paved it. That was part of our 3-year program. When they came in, it took them until 1996 to pave that section of road of the 101. Mr. Speaker, I can't tell you how badly I feel for the members of this House today who are suffering from the ravages of our highway system that came about because of the treatment of the Department of Transportation by the Liberal government of the day.
Order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton West on the point of order or question?
The honourable minister was
Point of order?
Yes.
Order, please.
The
Honourable
Minister
member
of
Cape Breton West has the
Transportation
floor.
was part of a government that bankrupted this province. We're lucky we were able to pay the creditors anything after that lot left.
Order, please. Not a point of order, but the honourable minister of Transportation and Public Works has the floor.
Words fail me. Hello. You know, Mr. Speaker, the honourable members opposite, particularly to my right over there, Mr. Speaker, make much of the fact that during the years of the Buchanan government that this province racked up quite a big debt. And they did. We racked up a debt, something in the order of $6 billion. But when they came to power, Mr. Speaker, don't forget that our debt went to $11 billion in the short space of 5 years. 5 years.
6 years. 6 to 11.
Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Annapolis on the point of order.
If the minister would take a question.
The honourable minister of Transportation, take a question. We're reverting back to question period. The honourable member for Annapolis on a question.
I don't want to debate the numbers of the past. I don't want to debate the numbers of the past. I'm just wondering if the number one highway that goes from Granville Centre to Annapolis Road will be paved this coming summer.
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I suppose I should get back on track of the principle of the bill that's before us, and I will do that. Mr. Speaker, the difficulty that we face at the present time within the Department of Transportation is the lack of dollars, and it's also the accumulated disrepair of our highway system. You can't go to any riding within this province, Mr. Speaker, without finding roads that are in a deplorable state. In fact, Mr. Speaker, one of the members on this side of the House spoke to me the other day, and she said, "You know, I thought that as Minister of Transportation, you'd have decent highways in your department." She said, "I thought they were the worst that I've ever driven on." So that goes to show you that nobody is able to say that their roads are in great shape. How much time do I have left? I've got lots of time. Have I? 48. Mr. Speaker, we have in the capital budget this year $112 billion. And we have to prioritize how we're going to spend that money. And I noticed that the member for Hants East, when he was speaking, I think was saying something to the effect we shouldn't be spending money on the 100 series highways. Well, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the members of this House, the day that we do not keep up the 100 series highways, this province is out of business for export and import. We don't have railroads anymore. We have the 100 series highways, and they are our lifeline, and we've got to give them priority. Now, you take $112 million and you take out what you've got to spend on the 100 series highways, and you're left with something like about $47 million, because that's what the cost is of running and repairing and expanding the 100 series highways. This year, the Highway 103, for instance, a very important highway connecting Halifax to Yarmouth, we're spending $19 million on that highway alone this year. Yes, indeed. But Mr. Speaker, that road is used by approximately 15,000 automobiles or vehicles per day. It's a high-volume road. It has to be twinned, and we're doing that. We're doing a section down in Shelburne-Barrington, the Barrington bypass. We're doing that this year. Those things are very, very expensive. But, Mr. Speaker, the problem is that by the time you've got that, you haven't got a great deal of money to expend on the other things that you must expend your money on. We have, as we keep being told by the media, we have to replace our old steel truss bridges. And although they are safe, they are not adequate for today's traffic. We have to replace them. We're spending $34 million this year of our capital on bridges and overpasses. $34 million. On top of 19 is $54 million just in those two elements of our capital program. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to increase our capital budget. There's no two ways about it. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, health is the number one priority of the public, it seems, and education is the second, and then community services. And by the time they get their share of increases, etc., there's very, very little left for transportation. But I can assure members in this House, Mr. Speaker, that quite truthfully, I understand their problem, because I have the same problems. Every member of this House has a problem with one or more roads in their constituency. We're doing our best. We're getting there slowly, but it's going to take a long time. Perhaps do I have any time left?
15 seconds.
Okay. Well, perhaps someday the federal government will step up to the plate and refund to us some of the $140 million that they take out of this province every year in motor fuel taxes.
Thank you, and I recognize the honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for the last few minutes, we've listened to I guess a monologue by each of the Tories and the Liberals sort of blaming each other on the past road problems. And, you know, when governments change, then priorities in certain ridings change, and you can blame each other all you want. But I guess really, Mr. Speaker, therein lies the problem, and that really there's been too much politics in paving and too much politics involved in setting priorities on our secondary roads. So I brought this bill forward, Mr. Speaker, because I think it can do a better job. And in the words of the Minister of Tourism, maybe it's the right bill at the right time. This act is called an Act to Set Criteria for Prioritizing Road Improvement Projects. Road Improvements Act, I think, is right here, right now, is the right bill for Nova Scotians, and to bring priorities to some fairness, some openness, some transparency in how the priorities on our roads are set. And Mr. Speaker, we all know that our roads in this province are in a crumbling state of repair. You know, every one of the 52 members in this House has a road story to tell. And many of our secondary roads are falling apart, and certainly as Nova Scotians, we continue to pay the high cost of road repair when we have to go to the garage to get rim or wheel repairs, new mufflers, alignments, front-end parts, shocks, on it goes. So it's a huge expense to Nova Scotians to travel on our roads. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, we have a huge crumbling infrastructure in this province, and in fact, the Department of Transportation themselves have indicated that we're something like $3.5 billion infrastructure deficit in this province. And to put that a little closer to reality, that's $345 million a year over the next 10 years is going to be required. And the department, to their credit, has identified that, but we're a long ways under in the amount of money on an annual basis that's needed to bring our roads back up to standard. Just this week, we heard about the infrastructure deficit in our bridges. 200 of our province's 245 bridges throughout this province are considered to be substandard, and it's something like $560 million that would be required to bring them all back up to a safe level. So, Mr. Speaker, there's no question we have a problem with our rural infrastructure, with our highways and bridges, and I think we've got to start somewhere. I believe this bill, Bill 52, is the right place to start. And it's because it's about fairness, it's about seeing equality in all areas of the province in prioritizing road repair. And you know, that's what Nova Scotians want to see. They want to see fairness. They want to see equality in the repair of our secondary roads. And they want to see the worst roads fixed first. They want to see the important roads repaired that is well-traveled and certainly in need of repair. So I want to take a minute, Mr. Speaker, to look at Bill 52 and outline some of the criteria on what we feel are important factors or criteria in secondary roads. In Section 3 of the bill, it outlines a number of the criteria that are important to establishing the priority or based on need. Number one there mentioned is the use of road for access to public facilities. So if a road is schools or businesses or maybe a bank or a library or maybe lucky enough to have a Department of Transportation plowshed on that road, those are public facilities that should be taken into consideration. B mentions the impact of the road on economic development. And very important factor in determining the economic health and growth of a community. And if a road is in good shape, then it's going to lead to more investment in a community. I just want to give you one example, Mr. Speaker. In my home community in Pictou West, there's been a strategic planning group called the Alma Mount Tom strategic planning group that's been working through the winter and into the spring and trying to identify some of the most important needs in that area along Highway number 4 from Alma right through to Mount Tom. And they've identified 4 important criteria that are needed to stimulate economic development. Well, guess what number 1 is on their list? It's the highway itself. Number 4 highway. It runs through Salt Springs and Mount Tom, runs into Colchester North in the Kemptown area. And that road is very bad, very poor. It was paved in 1959, and that's 45 years ago. And it has not really been touched since. So it needs repair. And this group of business people and community leaders have been working hard all winter and spring trying to stimulate economic activity. They've identified other things such as the park development like the Green Hill Lookoff and the Salt Springs Provincial Park that would need an investment and other items. But number 1 on their list is repairing Highway number 4. Other criteria, Mr. Speaker, that we brought forward here for fairness in prioritizing roads would include the tonnage of the vehicles used in the road. Is it used just by passenger vehicles, or is there heavy trucks or logging vehicles on the road? So the amount of heavy truck traffic is a factor. The time period since it was last paved, was it paved 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or as I mentioned previously, maybe as long ago as 1959? So what's the length of time since it was last paved? Safety factors such as the number of accidents that have occurred on the road, fatal or non-fatal accidents over the last number of years. Those are also important criteria that should be taken into consideration. And finally, any other criteria is prescribed by the regulations. And I would think that would include the actual condition of the road, the number of potholes, bumps, cracks, broken shoulders, and so on that are on the actual road. And maybe such things as the thickness of the pavement. Is it a couple inches thick, or was it 4 inches thick when it was laid down? So there's a number of criteria that we think are involve fairness and in setting the priorities on the road. It mentions in the bill, Mr. Speaker, that each road would be evaluated at least once every 4 years, and that each road should be evaluated within 1 year of this bill coming into effect. So who, Mr. Speaker, would do this evaluating? Who would set the criteria and determine that Road A is higher on the priority list than Road B? Well, we feel it should be done by qualified road engineers and take the politics out of paving. It shouldn't be the political people. It shouldn't be the MLA. It shouldn't be the Minister of Transportation. But it should be qualified road engineers that objectively look at all the roads within the province based on these criteria and then draw up a priority list. Once the priority list is put together, then that would become public information. The Minister of Transportation would have it in his or her office, and people could go there to look at it. They could go to their local DOT headquarters in their county and see the priority list. Or they could look at it online to see on the internet what is the priority list. And they could know then when where their road is on the priority list, and perhaps when it's going to be repaired or fixed up. So that all Nova Scotians would know when their particular road was going to be repaired, whether it's 2004, 2005, 2006. But somewhere down the road, they would be able to look at the priority list and know with confidence that their road is going to be repaired. The only other part of the bill is that if there's some urgent need that a road has to move up the priority list, then the minister of the day would have to justify that urgency to this legislative body if it was sitting, if not to the clerk of the assembly. But good reasons to back up why a particular road had an urgency that would have to be repaired or moved up the priority list. I know my time is limited here, Mr. Speaker, but I just want to say that I think overall, this Road Improvements Act, I think it's fair to all Nova Scotians in that it does take the politics out of paving. I believe it's open, it's transparent, and it's been endorsed by my caucus, and I certainly have received a number of calls and encouragement from others. Last week they thought the bill was good, that it would be effective here in Nova Scotia. And I think it is time that we change the system of prioritizing secondary roads, take it out of the political level, and put it on fair and open and honest criteria. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to mention that our local evening news, a daily newspaper in Pictou County, picked up on this bill that I introduced last week, and they favorably commented on it as follows. The suggestion of a priority list for the maintenance of roads in this province is one of the more rational and practical political initiatives in recent memory. The bill introduced in the legislature is such a common sense idea, it's a wonder the ruling government wouldn't jump on it and claim it as their own. Well, here, Mr. Speaker, they have that opportunity to adopt this legislation. I think it's what Nova Scotians want at this time. Fairness, openness, transparency tells us that repairing roads in order of greatest need just makes common sense. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member for Pictou West. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just got a 10-minute one. No, Mr. Speaker, that concludes the opposition's business today. Thank you.
Thank you. Now recognize the honourable Government House Leader for tomorrow's hours and order of business.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise to meet again on the morrow at the hour of 12 noon. The House will sit from 12 until 8, and the order of business following the daily routine and question period will be supply for 4 hours, and then subsequent to that, Mr. Speaker, we'll proceed with the Financial Measures Act in second reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Motion is the House adjourned to 12 noon tomorrow. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counter-minded nay. Motion is carried. We've reached the moment of interruption. Recognize the honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Well, my. I have some fans, that's for sure. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that at a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Be it resolved that MLAs and all Nova Scotians recognize the significant beauty, tourism features, and historic treasured aspects belonging to the constituency of Chester St. Margaret's and how important it is to all of us. Well, Mr. Speaker, I understand, Mr. Speaker, I have 10 minutes, is that correct? Basically, I'm sure that many people like yourself and certainly other members in the House also respect that a